saw Matt Rumpy skating. Is he a possibility for tomorrow?
He will not play tomorrow. He was full contact today. Given the time frame that he's been out, we think it's important that he gets a couple of practices under his belt in a full capacity. We'll monitor as he goes, but he's getting close.
Looks like Mika had moved to the point spot on the power play. You mentioned previously that it was, if you were to do 5 forwards, it would be him or Panarin. What do you think he can bring in that slot?
Well, I think he's a cerebral player. I think, he sees the game so well. He's similar to Brett in that regard. I think Mika might add a little bit more of a defensive conscience up there. I think Mika's game, he's one of the things that I've always admired about Mika is his willingness on both sides of the puck. I think he brings an element there, and I think that's important when we're on the power play. We're using 5 forwards. That was one of the risks that we were obviously willing to take with the group that we had, based on our roster right now and where it's at. So we've talked about Mika potentially going up there from day one. The day that when Foxy got injured and we were looking to replace him on the power play, and we felt like probably our 2 best options were Brett and Mika. So we spent a fair amount of time trying to make it work with Brett. We're going to make this adjustment and see where it goes.
Part of that to make a shot, there's zero expectation in his game to shoot.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was talking about on the ice, is just his willingness to shoot the puck, whether he's up top or on the flank. One of the reasons why we moved Brett up top is because we really liked his one-timer on the flank. And because Mika, obviously, one of his strengths is his ability to pound the puck. He can really shoot it. And so, but now that he's up top, he can do the same thing from up there also. And I think, it was one of the conversations I had with the 5 of them on the ice when we were practicing it. Sometimes I think we want to pass the puck in the net, and I think we can create different ways. We can create off the shot too. I think we have to have more of a willingness to shoot the puck and put a puck in play, and then create off the shot. If the first one doesn't go in, it's going to present opportunity for a next play, and that's usually when the best players work their magic. And so I do think we can add that element to our power play more consistently than we do.
You after the Chicago game, you weren't sure if you were going to stay with the 5 forward. Obviously, you have decided to do that. Why?
Because we think they're the best 5 guys right now to help us have success. We moved them in different positions. We made some adjustments. We had Laugh at the net front. He wasn't on that, right? So there were a number of adjustments that we made based on what we see.
How with the Olympic decisions coming, how frequently are you talking with Bill Guerin these days?
I talked to Bill a fair amount. We've had a number of calls, throughout the whole season. We had a Zoom call a week ago with the whole group. So there's been a fair amount of communication through that process.
When making those decisions, how do you manage kind of Team USA's interest, but also the fact that you have some relationships with these guys on the Rangers? How does that factor in?
Yeah, well, I think when you get into those circumstances, I think it's important, that you rely on some of the other guys that are part of the hockey operations process, and so, Chris and I talk about it a lot. Drew's part of the management group. I'm obviously part of the coaching staff. But having said that, there's been a number of guys that are part of our group that have been in to watch our team. So they watch our players. Billy Guerin was here himself last weekend, for example, when we played, who did we play? Colorado and Vegas. So he's been here himself watching our team. Other people that have been part of that hockey operations have watched our team also. So, the reality is when you get in these circumstances, I think human nature, there's always a human bias. And, I think it's important that we have checks and balances against all that. And we try to do that. And we build that stuff in.
John Cooper was in my Montreal this week, and he was asked a lot about like Nick Suzuki, and he kept saying, you know, like every city I go, it feels like I get all those questions, and then I get the best effort from these guys that are on the bubble. Do you feel it's the same for you, and do you expect the same kind of thing with a guy like Cole Caulfield?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. I just think it's once again, it's probably human nature. So, usually when we go into a city and there are American players that are, that are realistic prospects to make the final roster, obviously there's opportunity there, and so, we tend to get their best.
Like, it's unique, isn't it, that you have guys from other teams evaluating your players and talking to you about their evaluation of your players?
Yeah, that's part of the conversation, right? And that's where the checks and the balances come in, and I think it's important that we build those in. We've had discussions about that, I mean, and all of us have that. Heinze's on my staff. Billy's the general manager, and he's got a couple of guys on his team that are in play for the roster also. I don't think, we're no different than probably other teams. I'm sure Canada's doing the same thing, right? It's part of the process. I think what's important is that we all acknowledge, we all acknowledge the kind of uniqueness of it, and we try to put a process in place that is objective as it can possibly be, and we all hold the responsibility that we have to put the best possible team on the ice to give our respective team the best chance to win.
Do those conversations back to the Rangers, have they helped you at all as the Rangers coach? Because you're hearing what other people feel about your players?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, when someone maybe isn't up close to it as much as we are, sometimes they can offer a little bit of a different perspective. Sometimes when you're in it, you're in the weeds, so to speak, every day with the guys, and you're up close to it every day. When, someone comes from afar and has observations, if anything, it might provide a little affirmation that what we think is what we think, and if not, it might force a deeper conversation around guys, and so yeah, I do think it helps.
How did you look to bounce back? You talked about last week about having to play a certain way. Do you think you took your foot off the pedal a little bit? You need to get back on that hardness?
Yeah, I don't know if that's the right phrase. Taking our foot off the pedal. One of the things that I've always been a strong believer in is I think your mindset going into the game goes a long way to set you up for success. And you've got to bring the right mindset before the puck is even dropped, and I think that's important for us. I think we've got to have the right mindset, the right intentions, before the puck's dropped, and that's going to set us up for success. That's going to give us the opportunity to put the game in the ice that we're trying to put on the ice. And I think that's the human element of the game. Why can't you have your A game every single night? We wish we could. I think every team in the league feels the same way, but that's the human element of sports. And so, we're trying to navigate through this stuff. We're gonna learn through each experience, figure out what we can take from it, try to become a better version of ourselves, and then get excited about the opportunity that's right in front of us. So we've got one tomorrow we got to get excited about.
Now that the team is seemingly past the whole ice problems that you had at the start of the season, I was curious to get your perspective as a coach as to what kind of challenges it when a scoring drought the team gets in a very specific situation of a scoring drought solely at home, and what's it like psychologically for you to try to get the team out of that?
Yeah, so I think once again, you talk about just the human element of it. It's there are challenges sometimes as a coach and staff that you can predict, and there are others that you can't. And I'd be lying if I told you that I would have predicted that one coming into this season. So, but I think our guys did a really good job. What I can tell you is based on my experience is that we try to focus on the process. Let's play the game the right way. Let's stay in the moment. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's not dwell on the circumstance. Let's just stay in the moment, shift to shift. Play the right way, make good decisions. What our game plan is, and compete hard. you know, and I think that's really where our focus was just more about process than being overwhelmed by the fact that, okay, it's been a little bit of a struggle here. And so that
Have the results, your job is supposed to be that.
it's the same thing. Like, you know, there was a stretch of games there, and, you know, this is revisionist history, but there were a stretch of games when we played at home early in the season. We played some of our best hockey, and we didn't win. We ended up on the wrong side of the score. So, you know, we didn't score, but we produced offense, if that makes sense. And so, you know, once again, if you go back to the process, what can we control as players, as a team? If we're producing offense, we feel like inevitably the puck will go in the net. It's a different conversation if you're not producing offense. And we went through a little bit of a stretch in the season with that as well. And so that's just the journey, I think, that all teams go on. And there are challenges, as I said, that you can predict. There are other ones that you can't. And then that's the challenge of coaching in sports is, you know, how do you navigate through those adversities? How do you help your players, you know, with the right mindsets so that it sets them up for success? And I think the tendency is when a player struggles or a team struggles in a certain circumstance, there's a tendency to, you know, there's always that confidence question, you know, and for me, my experience has told me that confidence is very fleeting. You can get it back just as fast as you lose it, right? It starts with one good play, you know, a block shot, a one face-off, a one puck battle, a nice pass, you know, somebody scores, whatever it may be. So, you know, you gain confidence through sweat equity. You play the right way, and you build confidence by playing the game the right way and competing extremely hard. And really, that's where our focus was through some of these adversities. Just like you're trying to help a player that might be struggling for whatever reason. You know, I've always been a strong believer that you build confidence through sweat equity. And you know, we're not going to sit here and feel sorry for ourselves. We're going to work our way out of it. And then there also needs to be there needs to be an unwavering level of enthusiasm. And that's one of the easiest things to lose when you go through those types of adversities. And I think enthusiasm is an important element of success.
Okay. Thanks,
Sure.